Richard Bruce Cheney, born on January 30, 1941, in the quiet town of Lincoln, Nebraska, and passing away on November 3, 2025, in Northern Virginia, lived a life that shaped the course of American politics for over half a century. To many, he was a symbol of strategic brilliance, unwavering conviction, and controversy. To others, he was a man of resilience, one who battled not only political storms but the frailties of his own heart with unrelenting determination. As the 46th Vice President of the United States from 2001 to 2009 under President George W. Bush, Cheney's name became synonymous with power. Historians often called his time in office the most powerful vice presidency in American history, noting that he often influenced national decisions as deeply as, and sometimes more than, the presidents he served beside. Before that, Cheney had already left his mark as White House Chief of Staff for President Gerald Ford, U.S. Representative for Wyoming, and Secretary of Defense under George H. W. Bush. He was, to many, the architect of America's modern defense strategy, and to others, the controversial mind behind the Iraq War. At the time of his death, Dick Cheney's net worth was estimated at $150 million, the fruit of decades of leadership in both politics and business. Early life and education. Dick Cheney's story began humbly. Born to Marjorie Lorraine, née Dickie, and Richard Herbert Cheney, he inherited a legacy of hard work and quiet perseverance. His father served as a soil conservation agent for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, while his mother, a former softball star, gave him the spark of competitive spirit that would define much of his life. Growing up in Wyoming after his family moved there, Cheney's early days were filled with the rugged beauty of the American West. He attended Natrona County High School in Casper, where he first met Lynn Vincent, the love of his life, and his lifelong companion. Cheney enrolled at Yale University, a place filled with promise, but also personal struggle. He would later admit that Yale challenged him deeply, leading him to withdraw before completing his degree. Yet from his time there, he found a mentor, Professor H. Bradford Westerfield, who profoundly influenced his understanding of foreign policy and power. Determined to find his path, Cheney continued his education at the University of Wyoming, earning both bachelor's and master's degrees in political science. Though he began doctoral studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, he soon realized that his true education would come not from textbooks, but from the corridors of government itself. Life wasn't always easy for the young Cheney. In his early 20s, he faced 2 arrests for driving while intoxicated, moments he would later describe as pivotal turning points. "I was headed down a bad road," he admitted years later, reflecting on how those missteps pushed him toward responsibility and purpose. In 1964, he married Lynn, his high school sweetheart. Their marriage, which would span more than 6 decades, became a partnership of mutual respect, intellect, and devotion. Together, they raised 2 daughters, Elizabeth, Liz, and Mary, who would both go on to carry their father's spirit of determination into their own lives. During the turbulent years of the Vietnam War, Cheney received 5 draft deferments, prioritizing his education and family. His choices drew scrutiny, but he defended them candidly, once saying, "I had other priorities in the 60s than military service." A heart for public service. In 1968, Cheney received a congressional fellowship from the American Political Science Association, which brought him to Washington, D.C. It was there, in the bustling heart of American power, that his career began to take shape. He worked under Donald Rumsfeld in the Office of Economic Opportunity, and his keen mind and composed demeanor quickly earned him respect. When President Gerald Ford took office, Cheney rose to become White House Chief of Staff, guiding the administration with calm precision through turbulent political waters. In 1978, Wyoming voters elected Cheney to represent them in the U.S. House of Representatives, a role he held for a decade. Known for his sharp intellect and steady voice, he became a trusted conservative leader and eventually House Minority Whip. But his path would soon lead him back to the executive branch. In 1989, President George H.W. Bush appointed Cheney as Secretary of Defense. During his tenure, Cheney oversaw major military operations, including Operation Just Cause in Panama and Operation Desert Storm in Iraq. For his leadership, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the nation's highest honors, a tribute to a man who had navigated global crises with a steady hand. The businessman behind the power. When the political winds shifted in 1993, Cheney turned toward the private sector. He joined the American Enterprise Institute and served as CEO and chairman of Halliburton, one of the world's largest oil field service companies. Under his leadership, Halliburton flourished, and Cheney's business acumen strengthened his reputation as a shrewd strategist. However, his corporate years also brought controversy. Accusations of securities fraud and corruption followed the company, and though Cheney himself denied wrongdoing, the shadow of Halliburton would linger through his later political years. The vice presidency, power and controversy. When George W. Bush selected Cheney as his running mate in the 2000 presidential election, few predicted the extent of Cheney's influence. Behind Bush's genial smile stood a seasoned strategist, calm, disciplined, and quietly forceful. As vice president from 2001 to 2009, Cheney became one of the most powerful figures in Washington. His fingerprints were everywhere, on defense strategy, energy policy, and national security decisions. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, Cheney was at the center of America's response. He championed the war on terror, shaped the Patriot Act, and was instrumental in the decision to invade Iraq, convinced that Saddam Hussein posed an imminent threat. Many hailed him as a guardian of national security, others condemned him as the architect of an unnecessary war. Twice during his vice presidency, Cheney briefly served as acting president while Bush underwent medical procedures. It was symbolic of his stature, a man trusted to wield ultimate authority, even if only for hours. But Cheney's years in power were not without peril. In February 2007, while visiting Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan, a suicide bombing near the base killed 23 people. The Taliban claimed Cheney was the target, a chilling reminder of how closely he lived beside danger. By the time he left office in 2009, Cheney's approval rating had plummeted to 13%. Yet even his critics admitted one thing: he had redefined the modern vice presidency forever. Health battles and resilience. If Cheney's political life was marked by power, his personal life was defined by an extraordinary battle with frailty. A heavy smoker in his youth, Cheney suffered his first heart attack at the age of 37. It was the beginning of a long, painful relationship with heart disease that would test his endurance for decades. Over the years, he endured 5 heart attacks, multiple bypass surgeries, stent procedures, and the implantation of a cardioverter defibrillator. His doctors often wondered how his heart continued to endure such strain, but Cheney's willpower was fierce. In 2010, he was fitted with a left ventricular assist device, LVAD, a mechanical pump that kept blood flowing through his body even though his heart could no longer beat normally. For 15 months, he lived without a pulse, kept alive by sheer medical marvel and determination. Then, on March 24, 2012, Cheney received a heart transplant at age 71. The surgery lasted 7 hours, and the new heart gave him a second chance at life. His doctor later said it would not be unreasonable for an otherwise healthy man his age to live another decade. Cheney embraced that gift of time, attending family gatherings, writing books with his daughter Liz, and reflecting on a lifetime spent at the intersection of history and destiny, family, faith, and personal beliefs. Through all his triumphs and controversies, Cheney remained anchored by his faith and family. A proud Methodist, he was the first vice president to serve alongside a Methodist president. His faith, though quiet, was deeply personal, a steady presence through years of political turmoil and physical suffering. His wife Lynn was not only his lifelong companion, but also a formidable figure in her own right, a scholar, author, and former chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Together, they built a partnership based on intellect, mutual respect, and shared ambition. Their daughters, Liz and Mary, inherited their father's resilience. Liz Cheney became a U.S. Congresswoman from Wyoming, known for her courage to stand by her principles, while Mary built a career in the private sector and advocacy work. Cheney's unwavering love for both his daughters was evident, particularly when he publicly supported same-sex marriage in support of Mary and her wife, Heather Poe. Final years in passing. In his later years, Cheney lived quietly, splitting his time between his homes in McLean, Virginia, Wyoming, and Maryland. He continued to write, speak, and reflect on his legacy, often acknowledging both the admiration and criticism that followed him. But by late 2025, his health began to decline again. Complications from pneumonia and vascular disease weakened the man who had so often defied death. On the evening of November 3, 2025, surrounded by family, Dick Cheney's remarkable journey came to an end at age 84. A legacy of complexity and power. Dick Cheney's life was one of contradictions, strength and vulnerability, power and humility, controversy and conviction. He was a figure who divided opinion but commanded respect. His influence reshaped the presidency, the military, and America's place in the world. For all his flaws and triumphs, Cheney's life was above all a story of endurance, of a man who fought against political storms and the frailty of his own heart, yet never surrendered to either. Even in death, Richard Bruce Cheney remains a symbol of how deeply one man's convictions can alter the course of a nation. His heart may have been replaced, but it beat, quite literally, for the destiny of America.